Hi everybody, this is Guards. We're back with another video, so we're going to go ahead and work on the tank game to get some more here. So we're sitting in the first level, and there is quite a bit to do with the first level when it comes to regard of actually getting things going. One, we pretty much need to add enemies, add force fields to these doors, make a few buildings, and etc, etc. But we're not going to do that this episode, but we will end up doing that in a few episodes. What I want to work on this episode is getting the tank generation actually working. So we've got the hull here, and the hull, it does what it's supposed to do. So it's got the box collider, got the rigid body on it. I don't know if we need the rigid body on the box collider at the moment, since we don't actually use the physics engine to push around the player, but we need to figure out some way we're going to go ahead and get everything actually set up and working for the system here. So we do have some spawn logic going, which I set up here yesterday. The spawn logic is not much different than it was previously. The only difference is, instead of actually doing all the spawn data on the actual destination point, we now actually handle this all via the game controller. So if we actually can go find the game controller here, so there's a game data controller, and actually it's on here. So this actually now handles our spawning. We want to get this changed over so that way we're not spawning a single prefab, but instead we figure out what loadout the player had selected. So if they were playing as one of the 5 different vehicles, we get the right vehicle, we get the right variant of the vehicle, and then we get the right loadout selected, so that way when the vehicle does spawn, it's exactly what the player wanted to have spawned. This will work for the actual starting conditions. So if a player was playing, say, with a Lancer with a heavy cannon on it, then he also plays that for the next level, and so on and so on. So it's the same loadout for each level the player wants to select from. But then, if they decide to change that and then they respawn or whatever they were in the loadout system, we need to be able to change that and get that the respawn. Because how we're going to end up probably doing the actual loadout GUI. We actually do have a GUI for this. I have been playing around with this. Let me get this actually selected. It should be UI loadout. I just have to turn it on, and we can actually start it. So this is the loadout we're going to end up going with. This menu is just set up. It's more or less a template at the moment, so I know what I'm kind of going for. I wanted to get the scaling set up too, so because scaling is important, so when we switch through all the different sizes of the screen, I needed that UI to be consistent. Right now we have it set up so that way it expands in shape based on the resolution, so rather than... there's a few options you actually do get available. So if you actually do and flip this to free aspect, this should, in theory, if I change the size of it, lets me. There's a limit to how much you can change the size here. But if you change the size, it'll actually make sure that that GUI scales correctly with the size, so that way we don't have parts of it cutting off and we don't have various things. The unfortunate problem with this is that there's a lot of wasted space on left and right, but I do pretty much assume that a majority of people we're going to have are going to be playing somewhere around this resolution, because that's what a laptop kind of has, and there's a large group of people have laptops. There's a large group of people that have smaller monitors for their computers. At least that's the kind of data I've seen. That being said, it works with free aspect, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Most of the UIs do actually work with free aspect very well. It's just there's a couple of these that I am going to have to pretty much do this with. Option menu is going to probably be one of them. But we'll figure it out. Like, if it comes down later here and I figure out how to make this scale properly to work. But for this menu, one, we're going to probably spawn a copy of the tank up here. So we'll need to be able to spawn this vehicle easily. So we need a very simple spawn mechanic for it. Be able to turn off movement for this UI, because we don't want stuff to move in here, although I would love to see the cannon shoot, so when you have them selected, you can see where that weapon was and see it actually fire and everything else. There is a lot of stuff that needs to be able to be clicked in here, because right now we actually can't. There is no click capability, so if I actually did launch this and we actually went through this, there's no functionality for that. The plan is, I think what I want to do is make it so when you click the icon, you can then switch the thing, or just if you click this entire thing, will probably how we'll do it. Then you can switch the weapon you wanted to use. There will be some limitations on switching and everything else, but we need to get this to generate first. Not the UI itself. The UI we'll get to in a different episode, because that's, as nice as that would be to get done now, the problem is if we can't get the tank to generate with the weapon loadouts, it's not very useful. So the focus would be to get our tank generated object, which let's go ahead and go find it in our list. The folders are getting really clustered. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to probably need to get an integrated development environment just for the code because of how much stuff we have. So we've got the tanks in here, so we've got a tank generated object. So this also has a rigid body 2D on it. I hope you don't need a collider to make a rigid body 2D work. So that's the hope right now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to remove it off of this one. If I need to, I can re-add it, readjust it, rebalance it. But for the moment, I really do want the hull to act as just a collider. We're going to have to recode our damage scripts at some point as well. Because right now, the box collider is sitting on the Lancer object, and the plan I have is that when we do spawn the tank, the body is going to be a child object on the actual tank generated, and the turret is going to be a child object. They'll both be separate child objects, and they'll be aligned and everything else. But they'll independently have collision scripts on them and stuff, so they'll have different colliders and everything else, so that way when you push around, if you have a really long barrel and the barrel hits a wall, you don't keep turning or something like that. But if you get shot, the damage script is sitting on this tank generated, and right now how our scripts work is it detects the object that has the damage script on it. Now what we could do is make certain weapon parts have independent damage values, but I don't think that's going to work out for us properly. So we'll have to figure out some way to either find the damage script or kind of relay it. Relaying is a good option because what we could do is we can put some kind of interface-driven version of the damage script onto the tank body and then have it go, okay, go find the damage data on the super object and grab it and everything else. No matter what we do, is we're going to have to figure out some kind of search component system, so we're going to have to be able to search through the parts and stuff, which I think is going to be the better option, since we don't need to make a whole bunch of things, although I would love to make the damage data interface-driven, simply because then we won't have to store the hull armor and shield max values on the damage data. Instead, we can relay that back out to our data structure, because our data structure, if we go into here and go to the hull, actually does store those values for us as well. So it would be nice to be able to pull from those. Guess we're not going to focus on that though. So let's get everything generated first, then we'll fix the damage script. So this needs to be, if I get pull our scripts up here, let's close everything else, or reopen stuff as we need it. So right now we do have a way to instantiate an instance. So what we're going to do is come over to our data handler here, and let us drag in our tank generated into that slot right there. So that means we're going to be using that. I'm going to hit apply, so this applies to all of our active levels. So that's going to generate that tank, which will come down here and it will generate down in this part down here. We then need to be able to figure out what our template is. And we got to figure out how we're going to do this too. So our tank object is going to be stored on our game data controller, which is this right here. This actually is what stores our active tank. So this has, right here, current tank is on here, so it's going to store whatever our current actual tank data is. So we need to be able to pull this. We aren't going to call this method, or this field here directly. There actually is a method down here for it, get current tank, which will ensure that our tank is valid, which is kind of important. We'll probably put more validation checks in here, so I'm going to actually put to-do mark here. To-do validate loadout. Because this will be important, like if there's something wrong with that loadout, something at some point broke, we don't want the player to be stuck with a broken loadout. So we're going to need that. This is, luckily this game controller is actually stored in here, so we can just grab this and get our loadout that way. So we want this, and this is going to be a tank data object. So I'm going to copy both of these real quick, put them here, grab this. Tank data, tank data. So this gets our information for a thing, and we know that will never be null, so we don't need to null check it. But this will give us our hull, it'll give us our turret. Both of these we need to instantiate and drop onto the object. I'm going to Google this though, because it's been a while since I've done child objects in Unity. So Unity, add child. Yeah, I'll do add child game object. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to do this in a script, and this is a pretty old post. Let's try this. So you have an example here. Player.transform.parent equals new parent.transform. Makes the game object new parent the parent of game object player. You know, this is one of those times I kind of really should read up on how the Unity parent-child system works, because it looks like what they're doing is they attach the transforms. Version 28.2. So I think we're in the latest document, so I don't think we have to worry about this being outdated. But it looks like we just need to generate the object. So we'll have to do this. We are going to need to make a turret prefab, but I think if we get the hall to spawn first, I think it'll be a good starting step. So we're going to want to do this. We just want to copy this really quick. Now the trick is, what do we do for the transform or position? Let's Google this again. Because I think there's a missing step here. Because we want to instantiate an object, and we want to parent it at the same time. And we don't want to be setting its position right away. So Unity instantiate child game object. There might be a trick to it, and I just want to check. Instantiate your object as game object. So we don't actually have to. There's the whole, like, I think the whole position thing has been optional this entire time. I wish I kind of knew that, because that's been somewhat annoying. I would like to just spawn the object, then set its data up, rather than have to figure out the position first. So we want to instantiate. We're going to need to get our hall in our turret. So we're going to want, I think it's just called tank hall. We'll just call this hall data. And this will be on our tank data. And our tank data, let's go dig the scripts up. We'll go ahead and open them up and get them open so we can stare at them and we don't make mistakes. So we got our tank data. We don't need a loadout because we don't actually care about that. So we're going to need the tank layout is what we're going to need from this. And then in the tank layout, which is actually this object, the hall is just called hall and the turret is just called turret. So I made sure to do that much, so that way this is a lot easier. And the script is hall and the script is turret. So, and we don't need to import these because I'm not using any like packaging for these, so these are just kind of in the open. It's not the best way to go about doing this, but it works for the most part. I have been kind of looking at the possibility of breaking some of this stuff off in its own modulars. What I might end up doing here later, after I get all this stuff working and get this game kind of mostly functional, hall data is already defined in the scope. Yeah, you can name that. So as I say, what I might do is, if I get all this stuff functional, is I might break off this component system, because this component system is kind of useful. If you're making any vehicle in any of your games, or you're making even just a simple AI robot, being able to have a very simple component system where you go, okay, here's the robot's body, here's the robot's main axis of weapon layout, and then here's the weapons and their groups and stuff. That's reusable, that's recyclable between any game that would have that same functionality. To some extent, it would even work for a very simple platformer first-person shooter, or platformer shooter-based thing, because then you got to think the hull is the body of the character. The turret is the arms, because the arms would move independently from the body. And then you would have a weapon attached to that arm, which would be a gun. It would do the same thing. So instead of calling this hull, we can call this entity body. Instead of calling this tank, we can call this entity, like, aim axis or something. You get the idea. You can do a lot of stuff with it. We actually might end up with more than one turret right now, because right now the tanks only have one turret, but that's going to be something that's going to change. So we're going to need to instantiate the hull data, which we'll get that done because this is going to be null, so we're not even going to bother with that right now. I'm going to pop this over. I don't know why I got this cast as a game object, but we're going to just leave that there. So that's going to get our game object. Then, according to how this works, then we just need to do child object.transform bear. I'm going to copy this whole thing, rather than even try to thumb back and forth. So we're going to need to get the spawn object, which is, this is our child, okay, we actually need to rename this. This would be hall object. So we do the hall object.transform.parent, and then we want to set it to our parent, which is spawn object. But you know what, I'm going to change this to tank object. That way it's a little bit more consistent. I was using spawn object because we were just kind of making a very simple spawn script earlier, and I just kind of moved the spawn script from where it was at into here, so it was a little bit easier to work with. To get this, so we're going to do this real quick, do some documentation change. So collect data. Not really collecting, I guess we're retrieving. Retrieve data. Spawn and parent body to tank. So that should get our tank spawned in, and that should get it parented. And for all intents and purposes, our body should be centered on where the tank is. Our turret will probably not be, and this will be something we need to actually change with our script. Our script does not have a offset for this. Yeah, we probably should put an offset in here because we have rotation, weapon groups, prefab. So we'll do public float offset x equals 0, and we'll do another one right here. I need to look up if there's some way to document these too, because when you're sitting in Unity and you're in the inspector over here, you don't really get to see a lot of documentation. I think it might be very useful. So we'll do that. So this will be offset transform for parenting turret to body. And we'll just duplicate that right there. So this will give us documentation, at least when we're in the code. It's not going to give us much documentation outside of the thing. Because I know you can do this right here, because I've got this for the description, that way I get a text box rather than a single field. I'm wondering if we could do the same exact thing down here, and there probably is a way. I'll have to look it up later. But that'll do that, and we'll focus on the body. So there is a return expected. That will be game controller line 129. Did it just like compile? Oh, because we're missing one. Gotta love compiling in certain languages. Like certain language would be like, oh yeah, you're missing a return down here because you're missing a bracket up here. It's one of the things I gotta really appreciate about Java, because Java would go, hey, you're missing a bracket on this line. C kind of does this too, and I think it is really just a compiler thing. It's not even a language thing, it's just how well the compiler was built. I know there are some really nice, you're missing, okay, can I convert tank hall to... Oh, because I need to do hall data.proof. Because what that tried to do is it tried to actually instantiate hall data. You can't actually copy your tank object or your data objects and stuff for scriptable objects. It was one of the ways I was thinking about doing loadouts, and I decided that was a really dumb idea. You know, one of the things we probably could do is we probably could make a method in our data object called create new turret, and that would handle this entire thing for us. This will work. So let's get this tested and let's see if we can spawn our object in and we can drive. Those are the two important things. We've got Bufkus. So I don't see a hall. I'm pretty sure we parent transformed that. We're missing something. There is a set parent method. The key is pass false for the second parameter. What is this method though? Ah, now this is a step we were missing. This is the reason why I wanted to Google this, is that this is actually very important. You can try temporarily setting the parent to 1-to-1 and the position to 0-0 before parenting, restoring original value afterward. Yeah. So we need to just set the... We just need to set the position to 0. So this will be right here. And this will be hall object. We don't... Yeah, I think transform. And then, like, position? See if that compiles. I don't think it's correct, though. Hopefully we don't have to mess with the scale as well. I hope that's not a thing. Let's hit play. We still don't have a hall. Let me check to see if our object even has a parented object here. So it does have the hall, and the hall is currently setting at the wrong position. So it's not setting the position right. Because we're going to have to probably set the local position. So Unity, set child position. Yeah, it's local position, that's what I thought it was. Because there is a difference, because it's going to think its global position is 0, 0 to start with, because you parented it. That's probably what's going on. And what happens when you parent it, it probably flips that global position to a relative local position, which we then need to set to 0. Wow, this is a weird music. I like it though. It's called Pirate Burglar. Or is that the album? Oh, it's Island by Infinitation. And then I wish I had a way to show this, but the music thing is on my actual computer. But it moves. So we got it set up here. Now I need to figure out if it's center, but I'm not sure how to do this. So here's our tank generator. Okay, it's centered, so we're good. We got our body generated. Now we got to get the turret going. So I say we do that in another episode. That we would keep this one short, so I'll be right back with the next one.